And so, happy Thursday to you. Hope things are well and you're staying strengthened in the provisions God makes for our lives to stabilize our minds as well as just all the different circumstances we find ourselves in, and just trusting Him in terms of His sovereignty and the provisions and His foreknowledge in terms of just dealing with our lives. But very, very encouraged to hear the governor's announcement yesterday in terms of allowing churches to be at 25% capacity. That puts us at about 60 people here at Living Hope. And so we are strategizing plans to make sure that we're doing what we can to keep you safe and to put things in place as far as what we will do for cleanliness. We are certainly awaiting the governor, more specifically to give the requirements that would be needed. But we will then communicate to you how we're internalizing that and the things that we would do in terms of our efforts, and then you can then decide to what extent you're comfortable in terms of us putting forth those efforts. You would be coming, quote unquote, at your own risk. Ultimately, the responsibility we all carry in terms of just taking care of ourselves and being wise in our own decisions. Like, we can talk about 6-foot social distancing, but that requires every person to function in a way that is commensurate with that. But again, we will, make provisions and give direction as far as how we'll do that. But what it really does require you to do is to let us know, do you want to be part of that 60, if you will? Certainly if we have a significant number above that, that's where I would consider doing 2 services. Effectively, if we had 120 people that wanted to come to church that Sunday or any Sunday after that, as long as that is the barriers or the paradigm that is set up, then we would do 2 services. How we would manage that, again, we'll kind of cross that bridge when we get to it. But just knowing, who is out there. There is a big question as far as what we would do with kids. Kind of dicey to think about doing Sunday school because of how to manage social distancing with kids. And so you just again, we'll think and pray about that in the conversation the elders need to have as far as what we would do in regards to that. As far as willingness of Sunday school teachers to teach, that's another dynamic. We are asking the worship team to kind of see where they are in terms of being here on that Sunday the 31st. So it'd be potentially a very exciting time for us finally to be together. And then again, just letting us know by what I call, email, Facebook. There's a post out there in terms of letting us know, and trying to figure out what a good way for you to communicate to us is kind of was a challenge in of itself. But when it comes to all the aspects of technology in terms of what we're engaging with at Living Hope, as I continue to say, we're kind of working through this. We're taking steps. We're learning. We're growing. And trying to do our best. So we appreciate the patience you've had with us. But without further ado, let's get back into Psalm 23, right? The exciting things that this communicates, and just this whole idea of you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, and just seeing how that points to a picture of just the forethought, the foreplanning that a shepherd takes in terms of in the summertime, remember the seasonal aspect of what is here in the Psalm, according to Philip Keller, going up to that mountain plateau, that table, if you will, and making sure the minerals and the salt are there in the soil that the grass would then take in and the sheep would eat it. And so, and realizing, again, that this provision, this table that God is preparing is in the presence of enemies. And that first enemy we looked at yesterday was really what the sheep would take in. The enemy of plants and poisonous things that the shepherd would have to pull out. And it really does reinforce just what are we allowing to come into our minds? What are we exposing ourselves to? When we think about the comparison, particularly that the Bible gives in terms of the Word of God being like bread. And man cannot live on bread alone, but the Word of God, and the analogy that provides for us. And we are responsible for our own souls. We're responsible for the content that is there, the things that our mind's reference in terms of what's in our heart, to determine our reactions, to determine what we say, what we think, how we then behave. And so the heart really is the wellspring of life. So much of who we are flows from that, and a lot of what's in our heart is determined by the things that we take in. But naturally, the other thing that the other enemy, where God is preparing this table, He's making provision for us, is predators. Naturally, sheep are very susceptible to danger. There are no real means themselves to protect themselves, and as we've seen, that's why the shepherd, like the role of a shepherd, is unique in the animal kingdom because of the fact that sheep are so needy and they really can't defend themselves. So the shepherd has to be the one that defends them, and that would factor into what table, what plateau is chosen. Is there line of sight? Is there gaps in terms of seeing a predator coming, so the shepherd could react properly, as well as just him being the defender in terms of predators. And when you think about the enemies we have, the predators in our life, it's very tempting to think that people are our enemies, and certainly people can give us a boatload of stuff that we are then faced to deal with. And the Bible has a lot in terms of then what we do with them. Love your enemies, do good to those who despitefully use you. The fact that God gives that principle, not only giving that principle, but gives us both an example and the provision to do that. God never asks us to do what Jesus hasn't effectively done Himself. In fact, I just love what it says in the book of Hebrews, I believe it is, in chapter 12, where it says that Jesus is the author and finisher of our faith. And we think a lot of the ways that kind of Jesus goes before us is the fact that He has modeled everything, that He has been tempted in every way that we have been tempted, but was without sin. And really the same resources that were available to Jesus, for the most part, are available to us. And as Jesus is the author and the finisher of our faith, He shows us how we can deal with that. And so to set that standard of loving our enemies, that we recognize that people people are an obstacle. People create problems for us. Different circumstances come around because of choices people make. But hardship by association sometimes. And so we recognize that, but we do also have to recognize that, particularly when it comes to the unbelieving world, that people are not our greatest enemy. That our greatest enemy is the kingdom of darkness. That's what we wage war against. Even though we might think of people being our enemies and what our reflection to them is, we don't make war against people. We love our enemies that are people. But we do make war against Satan, in terms of the influence that he and his demons would seek to have in our lives. And just being aware, the Bible, in terms of how how God would ask us to relate to Satan, it is about vigilance. It is about awareness. It is about, recognize that Satan is prowling around, seeking someone to devour. Something that can be said in terms of sheep and the protection that preparing this table before them in the presence of their enemies. What the shepherd would do with the sheep is that what is true. It is the wandering sheep. It is the defiant sheep that would be most susceptible to the predator. It's the one that goes outside of the protection of the shepherd that is often taken. And so in the same way, when we see Satan, prowling around, seeking to whom he's going to devour. Who's he going to devour? The person that's not close to God, the person that's not in the Word, the person that is not established in their thoughts and their faith, towards God, in terms of what they would understand, how they would conduct their lives, what they would orient themselves to. And so therefore they're very susceptible to the influence of Satan. And so that's what we have to understand in terms of our primary enemy. We need to be vigilant. We need to be aware. The fact in James where it says, "Resist the devil, and he will flee from you." That represents the fact that, again, when we think of our primary enemy, Not that I think we deal with Satan personally, but I think it is, his minions, his demons that we deal with on a more consistent basis in terms of temptation, the arrows that they shoot forth. But to recognize that God says that the first thing we do, in fact, effectively the only thing we do, is resist the devil. Now, I think there's a lot of things that we do beforehand in terms of being in the Word, being filled with the Spirit, being in prayer, thinking about that armor of God that points to all the different dynamics of what God offers us in terms of protecting our minds with the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, the sword of the Spirit, the gospel, the foot shod with the gospel of shod with the gospel of peace. No, I can't remember quite the wording there. But anyways, the point being is that we have all these weapons that are available, but the end dynamic is I resist the devil. And when I do that and I truly resist the devil, he flees from me. You combine that with the idea that's presented in 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, that we will not be tempted beyond what we can handle. And, that is a good 1-2 punch in terms of anything we face in God's economy, with God's provision, with the table that He has set before us in the presence of our enemies, we should be able to handle. Not handle in our own provision, not in our own power, but with the resources God gives us, with the table that God has prepared for us, that we should be able to handle the enemy. We should be able to handle the temptation. Again, if we're not being tempted beyond what we can handle, again, that's handle in God's power, in His provision, in His Word, and Spirit, and prayer, so on and so forth. But what we could, when we're facing that temptation, the thing we should tell us, I can handle this. Like, by definition, the Bible tells me that I can handle this because God's not going to tempt me beyond what we can handle. Now, I think at times God will press the envelope in terms of what we're exposed to reinforce, well, maybe we're not prepared the way that we should be. We're outside of the Word, we're outside of prayer, we're outside of fellowship, we're outside of worship, those 5 things that I talk about. Well, now, God is going to, tempt, here's the pressure, here's the circumstance, here's the thing. And, well, of course you're not going to be able to handle that because you're living in your own power. But if I'm in the power of God, I'm accessing the provisions God gives us, part of the deception that Satan brings is he tries to tell us that he's more powerful than he is. And that's what a bully is, right? And Satan is a big bully. He puts himself off like he's different than what he really is, and kind of you just poke him and he falls down. And so sometimes what we do is we give in to Satan because, we just don't have that awareness, we don't have that faith, we don't choose that. I think we like sin too much. I think we buy the lie. We buy, I'm fighting. We have to make ourselves look like we're fighting. But, when you really think, resist the devil and he's going to flee from you. Well, maybe we're just not resisting enough. Because if this devil is supposed to flee when we resist, well, sometimes, it's not like he can break that dynamic. It's not that Satan can shake this fist. Even if he resist me, I'm not going to flee. Satan can't do that. He doesn't have that authority. And so therefore, if he's not fleeing, then we aren't resisting. And it points back to, again, here's this table that God has prepared before us in the presence of my enemies. And, we should be fine. We should be provided for. But that there's work we need to do. There's work we need to do to be close to the shepherd. Because the only way we will have protection from our enemies is if we're close to the shepherd. And so just be encouraged, be convicted, be challenged by that in terms of just the provisions that God makes for our lives that makes us stronger than maybe we might want to admit we are. But when we choose that, when we become more than conquerors over fear, anxiety, unkindness, hatred, jealousy, pride, lust, gossip, all the different things that come. Yeah, just how much are we gathering things up to build up our souls, and then to what extent are we resisting the devil? So, who is our true enemy? So, God bless you in your day, and again, look forward to what's going to happen. What is it, 9 days from now? But join us. It was not Friday yet, so I don't have to encourage you to join us on Sunday. But be back tomorrow, where I delve into a little bit more of this psalm. God bless.